Welcome to all of you to the second Smart Grid Educational Series webinar. I'm your moderator, Erfan Ibrahim of the Bazaar LLC, and we are very privileged to have today two speakers who are seasoned experts in the field. And the first one is Rolf Bienert, and Rolf has had a very successful career in this area of the electric sector, working with standards groups, specification groups, and alliances for several years. And he will be speaking on the OpenADR and Usnap activities. And then we also have Ben Boyd, who's had a very long and productive career in this area of regulatory policies and working with state commissions and also with vendor companies, and is now working at EnerNex Corporation as their VP on regulatory and policy. These people will not only inform you, but they'll also educate you. And this will help bring out your creative skills into this field. The topics of demand response and standardized communications has been becoming very, very important as we are seeing challenges with peak demand and the need for a demand response application and an open standard for that, so that utilities and vendors and consumers can all work towards having a comprehensive framework in place to reduce the peak demand. As the peak demand grows, we need to meet it with peaker units that are usually run with natural gas, and the cost of that is skyrocketing. And so there's a need to clip that peak. There is also the need in with the renewable energy like solar and wind, the need for demand response in order to tailor the demand for electricity to follow the availability of electricity from these sources. So this is a very timely topic, and the need for an open standard is even more pressing in order to commercialize this technology and have deep penetration in the electric sector. And with the Usnap, because the standards for communication are evolving gradually, there is a need from the vendor community, those who make smart appliances, to have some kind of a communication interface. And the Usnap group has done a remarkable job in coming up with a specification for standardizing that interface that allows these appliance manufacturers to go ahead and build their devices and allow the communication part of it to evolve over time using the concept of dongles. And there have been many parties involved in this, and Rolf is going to talk a little bit about that, how it evolved. And then on the cybersecurity side, there's been a lot of talk as we get more and more interconnected in the electric sector. There is a need to have consistent cybersecurity policies and also data privacy policies. And Ben is going to help us understand what each of those concepts are, as well as tell us some of the activities that are occurring at state and federal level in terms of creating new policies and what their implications are going to be. So this webinar series is primarily meant for education, and education for empowerment. As you can see from this intro page, the aim of this series is to help you help the industry. So the more you understand these issues and the more you can apply your own creative skills in this area, the better off everyone is going to be. And while there are many conferences and workshops that are going on worldwide, a lot of times because of the lack of funding, we have a challenge of traveling there and attending these events. So a lot of people in the industry who have creative ideas and who can work to solve problems are not able to make it to those events. And so this is why there was a need for a free public service so that people do not have to face these economic challenges and can contribute. So with that, I'd like to now welcome Rolf. And Rolf, if you go ahead, yes, you have unmuted. And I'm going to ask him to start the presentation with OpenADR. So Rolf, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Erfan, and thank you everybody for joining this afternoon. Quick question, Erfan, so do I need to get virtually the ball from you to progress the presentation here? I think I still see the control in your hand.
I'm going to move it on to you. Thank you for the reminder.
Excellent. Thank you, Erfan. Again, thanks everybody for joining. It's great seeing such a broad spectrum of folks here on the call. When I look at the attendee list, it's really everybody from research to very well-known companies in the energy space here. So I'm glad everybody could make it today. So let's jump right in. And Erfan, can you hear me okay? Just to confirm here.
Oh, yes, you sound just fine.
Excellent, very good. So let's jump in here and look at OpenADR. Starting with more about demand response. Erfan already did a very good introduction here, and I'm sure most of you know and fully appreciate that the growing peak load demand everywhere in the country and even throughout the world represents a significant challenge. And in fact, last year we saw with these heat waves in the Northeast that systems can be really stretched thin there to really satisfy all the customer needs. In fact, I believe, if I remember correctly, in July of last year, PJM over in the District of Columbia, they broke their record for peak power use, and I think they hit about 158 gigawatts in this peak. So they were really happy to be able to shave off some of that power consumption by using demand response, and they really were able to contain this and made sure that there is no blackout for all these districts that are part of that over there. So that worked out pretty well for them. This was, however, primarily a manual effort, since there are a lot of aggregators out there that help with that, and it's a lot of calling involved and maybe texting and emailing and any other way or form of communication is being used on that end. So anyways, that being said, and also to Erfan's point, again, 10% reduction for only 60 hours a year, saves us about 50 of these peak power plants that are so expensive and contribute to our tier 3, tier 4 prices on all of our energy bills, and not just anybody else, but we are all affected by that as well. So hopefully we can help flattening these curves and look at it from that perspective. So moving on to quite an interesting chart here. I think going into the details of all of that could already take the full hour. So I'm only going to touch on this briefly. If you're interested, you can find this at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, so FERC. They have done studies on demand response potential. And what you can see here is basically on the very left side is a business as usual with all the regulatory measures in place, with all the current functionality available. That's about the maximum demand response you can achieve over a period of the next probably about 10 years. So 38 gigawatts as kind of like a baseline here. But then if we expand this, so we go beyond business as usual, so we establish more tariff structures to allow for this, more incentives, things like that. You see that you can almost double this already, 82 gigawatts. And again, these numbers, I'm sure they change every year or every quarter even if you do a new study, but it gives us a very good illustration here on how this all fits together. On the very right now, you, however, see that this big blue bar, that is really what's achievable with additional technology, and that's really the key aspect here. So technology makes this work, whereas you see these other areas that are more driven by just simple incentives and other systems. They don't really grow that much, but the pricing incentive with the associated technology is really what's going to drive all of this forward. So now, again, why is demand response really important? It offers a variety of financial and operational benefits, of course, both for the customer side, but also for utilities and the grid operators. Quite often, for those of you on the line that don't know that, quite often these are two completely different things. So if you're about to do research about that, that would be the first area to start with. Electricity can still not really be stored economically. So really the balancing supply and demand is one of the key issues here to keep reliability and a system and network integrity going. So that is all a part of demand response. But in this day of age, we also see more of an environmental and societal facet to this. Imagine, the Facebook and everything. If you start competing with other people, saying, "Hey, you have a hybrid car, so you're on top of the environmental development." At the same time, you notice more and more that people start, in a sense, really bragging with, say, like a solar system or other things. So that you have something to talk about, and this is an excellent driver to make energy and energy consumption more of a social thing. And I think that's a benefit for all of us here on the call. And so that all being said, let's move ahead here to really the automated demand response side. So what happened was, and I go into the timeline a little more in a few slides here, but in 2002, the goal was set to really develop a low-cost automation infrastructure. And it should be reliable, and it should deploy control strategies that are already available in the building automation. So OpenADR became a public domain standard. And again, I will talk about the development in just a second here. And people could use it and can work with this in whichever way or shape or form they like. So some of the utilities in California, for instance, are already deploying these technologies very, very successfully here. So let's look at this really quick here. How does it look like? How can you really imagine that to work? So the core system is the demand response automation server, or from an OpenADR 1.0 perspective, the DRAS, DRAS. Later we talk about 2.0, and I'll tell you a little bit about the difference there. So the demand response automation server is connected directly to the utility. In a lot of instances, it's already placed within the back end of the utility, basically. And we use the internet to communicate either straight to a customer side, or in that case, a resource side, like side A and side B here, or they can communicate to an aggregator. You see this as this little bubble in between aggregated loads, which then in turn talks to different sites out in the field. So these sites could be large industrial complexes, could be maybe apartment communities, but even down to residential homes. On the residential side, however, and small commercial, we see a lot that this is being done also through some alternate communication. So, for instance, wireless and things like that that go into the homes at the end also through the internet, but there could be a different communication medium in between. So that's why we split it out here. So that's how all of this is in general set up, and the utility or the ISO, RTO can then create events for these clients and for these sites to participate in, to really shed load and maybe to control their pricing in the near future as well, if all of this starts up really. So let's quickly look at what's already out there. So here's a little map of the world, and it's probably current since there's so many developments popping up. But as you can see here already, everywhere in the world there are a bunch of these systems popping up. And this here on the lower left side is a projection from 2011 for California. And you see that the plan was to deploy about 160 megawatts of OpenADR within California. And in fact, I can say now that we are now at 250 megawatts. So essentially, the California utilities have about 250 megawatts at their fingertips using OpenADR. So that might not sound that much in the overall scheme of things, but it gives them a significant amount of leverage to really flatten the peaks and to work with that. So looking at OpenADR, how does it go together with other technologies? Well, as you can see here, essentially it's an XML data model, which is transported over a variety of mediums or interfaces, primarily, of course, internet. It's a web services system. And as you can see from left to right, there are certain aspects to it. Price and reliability, of course, that's something that's driven by the providers. But then if you look further to the right, it's really technology agnostic because it can handle any kind of protocol that is already being used in the facility. So in other words, if you have already a building management system in your factory using maybe BACnet, it's easy to integrate with that because you find basically components, you find energy management systems that can talk OpenADR on one side, and then on the other side just talks to the systems in the buildings. Same is true, of course, for the Smart Energy Profile, SEP. We have, in fact, demonstrated very easy transitions between OpenADR and SEP at the Grid Interop a few months ago. So that works really well also. And as you can see here, there's a lot of other possibilities, and you can review, of course, the presentation in detail once Erfan makes it available. Now, let's look at what happened here. I mentioned the date 2002 earlier. Well, funny enough, when I moved to California, I moved to the Silicon Valley in 2000, and I thought I'm of course going to the the area with the top developments. Everything is high tech and so on and so forth. And I'm sure you can imagine my surprise when in 2001 I was standing in the dark basically when we had these blackouts, these rolling blackouts here in California. So that was the first time I was confronted with it, and at that point I was still in the telecom business. So the research was then really initiated by this California Energy Commission peer project together with Bienert, and they were working on this. They had pilots and field trials over a period of years, and in 2007 this was done. The report was put out between 2007 and 2009, and the first installations were made, as you can see here. Now, of course, we're already past 2011. I should update this slide here pretty soon. But when the alliance was then started to really look at interoperability, testing, and other things concerning this standard. And I will tell you a little bit more about OpenADR 2.0 in a minute here. But the alliance is focusing on certification and testing of products for the OpenADR 2.0 standard, and we're making very good progress here, and we should be well on our way for a delivery in Q2 of 2012. In fact, we already see the first products out there. So that's a little bit on the history here. Now, let's take then a look. So OpenADR 1.0 and OpenADR 2.0, for those of you that have not been involved with this, it'll not make a big difference, of course, but some of the key aspects here are that OpenADR 1.0, again, was developed by the California Peer Program with Bienert, and it is a report that is available out there. Everybody can download it, and you can use it to get things started. It gives you some very good strategies on how to go about with your technology in the buildings, and you can develop your own intelligence, of course. It had no certification program, and it was fairly limited to California. So it was also just geared towards the California ADR programs. What OpenADR 2.0 does now is we took the work of several organizations, and you'll see that in one of the next charts, and created a profile specification based on the common information model. And we are developing the test tool, the test plan, certification program to make sure that for you as potentially a vendor, you have a good pathway into this ecosystem, and for a potential user like a utility or an installer, they know they can trust certified products out there. And we also conform to the NIST Smart Grid Interoperability Framework. Interoperability, as well as, of course, smart grid security, cybersecurity that Ben is going to talk about, is extremely important. So that's how we put this together. And again, a little more detail here. NIST started this initiative to really harmonize these efforts in the smart grid arena. And several of the so-called priority action plans, you can find them on the NIST SGIP website. If you Google NIST SGIP, you get to a website that shows you all the efforts if you're not part of that. Some of these action plans sponsored by the government basically give us the basis for OpenADR 2.0, and it was then developed using pricing data models and communications that are out there. And with that, we started building this standard. So just in a nutshell here, we took OpenADR 1.0, as you can see there in the middle, and kind of fused it together with requirements from IRC, from NASB, from the OpenSG group, the CA, IUG, as well as the SIM, the Common Information Model standard, and fused this all together to create the so-called OASIS Energy Interoperation specification. And the OpenADR Alliance is using that to basically build our 2.0 standards. Again, same general concept applies here. We want to communicate events and prices to the resources out there, and what you do with that is up to you or up to the utility program that you're participating in. So, taking a quick look now, for instance, one of these events that I just mentioned. Those of you familiar with demand response will know this already, but for those of you starting to look into it, it might be interesting. So when we say we do a demand response event, we just want somebody to save or conserve energy. Very straightforward. However, as you can mention, there's a little more to this. So here you can see, for instance, what we can do in OpenADR. This is in fact the active event period. So with other words, if there's an exceedingly hot day predicted, for instance, for tomorrow, and the utility know that their power needs will exceed their generation, they will be able to send out this kind of event. Could say, for instance, from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. or in view of the upcoming electric vehicles and so on that might be plugged in the evening. This could be an event that goes even longer than that or starts at a later period of time. So, and OpenADR has now the possibility to define a lot of these different parameters in the event. You see here there's a certain notification period that you have to have. And then underneath the main line here, the main timeline, you see different pricing information, for instance, for like an EV price or the building price might change. Or there could also be a dispatch level, with other words, in intervals you could be required to save a certain amount of energy. So an OpenADR 2.0 event can contain any or all of these pieces of information here to give a vendor of a building automation system, for instance, enough information to work with to define a strategy for this building, to really kind of work with this information and determine when it makes sense for the building owner, for instance, to give something back. All right, so moving on swiftly here, I'm not going to go in all the details. This is, for instance, the list of services that Oasis defined for the OpenADR profile. And just to name a few, there's EI event, which again is the core event functions, information models. We have, of course, EI quote, which talks about prices, dynamic prices, or other operations here. And there are multiple other ones that you're very welcome to review at some point. You can also download the Oasis Energy Interoperation spec from their website and get more information. So just to give you an overview, this is the lingo that OpenADR 2.0 Oasis is using. Essentially, the VTN, that's what we saw earlier as the server, can talk direct to end nodes, but it can also talk through other nodes. So essentially, the communication between these points here, between A, B, for instance, or between B and F, that's what OpenADR 2.0 describes. Again, the intelligence between these connections, so the intelligence in B or the intelligence in A in the utility, or an intelligence with a building, say like in block F here, that is completely up to the vendors and maybe to you out there to figure out what is the best use of that information there. So this is just to kind of visualize how these things look like. All right, real quick, moving on. What does the Alliance do? Well, we're a member-based organization, and as I already mentioned, we take this standard, the Oasis Energy Declaration, and we build a profile that works for that. So it's a nice group of companies, and we really want to try and coordinate with the standards organizations out there. And we are working on implementing global testing and compliance so that, again, both users as well as vendors and buyers can be assured that the devices will work when they purchase them. On the other hand, of course, we do education, and we want to really help the adoption and market acceptance of OpenADR. So just to give you an idea, these are some of our members here. You see board members, Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, Honeywell, PG&E, SCE here, but you see a whole bunch of other members that are contributing down here, typical smart grid players, and we have as the members a lot of the other energy companies out there already. So that's what we're really pushing towards. And last but not least, on OpenADR here, I think we're pretty much out of time. These are our deliverables for this year. As I mentioned already, pretty much in Q2, we want to have OpenADR 2.0 ready, and then really at the end of the day, kick off the testing and certification. One thing I wanted to mention here is the last bullet point. EPRI has also started the work on a demonstration project to have OpenADR really explored and demonstrated, and the kick there is in April. It's I believe the first week of April, and of course utilities and vendors are very much invited. If some of you are interested, just shoot me an email and I can make a connection here. But looks like a pretty good event. More than 20 utilities, I think, are already signed up. So we're hoping that this is another good driver for the market. All right, with that, I flip it back to Erfan real quick to look at the questions.
Yes, thank you, Rolf, for this informative presentation. We have a couple of questions. So one is from Denise Antoniadis, who asks, Rolf, you mentioned the California utilities are involved in OpenADR. What is the CalISO role in this?
CalISO has been working, of course, with the utilities on these strategies. So as far as I know, of course, it would be a good question for the PG&E folks and the Southern California Edison folks. They do submit use data to the utilities, and the utilities then, of course, do their own math in the back end and then create these events out there. So essentially, the demand response programs are run by the utility itself, using input from the CalISO folks. I should mention that the ISO RTO Council, the IRC, has recently started to look at a harmonized backend. So that would be probably what the question was about. Looking at harmonizing this information exchange between the ISO and the utility and the ISO and potentially aggregators out there. And the OpenADR Alliance is actively working with the ISO RTO Council to create an OpenADR 2.0 profile that also satisfies that need. So hopefully we'll see a continuous string of OpenADR 2.0 messages on both ends.
Okay, very good. The request is from the attendees to please post your questions in the Q&A and not in the chat window. I'll go ahead and read the ones that have already been entered in the chat, but it would be recommended to put them in the Q&A. The next question is from Ken Wirth, who asks, okay, I guess that was just an audio thing. The next question is from William Miller, who asks, there are major security problems with SOAP and REST. Is OpenADR looking at XMPP?
Yes, very good question. Kind of nice that we're that detailed of a question here. Yes, we do. In fact, so we currently define two transport mechanisms, and we are open also to add other transport mechanisms over time, because at the end of the day, we are looking at web services that can be fairly easily implemented. And the initial transport was a simple HTTP, and we're looking at security, TLS, for instance, with a message wrapping, like an XML wrapping, digital signature there to secure that. But for other scenarios, in particular also for push scenarios where we want to push events to a client. That's in particular important for fast demand response, as Erfan mentioned earlier, to really load balance and frequency, the frequency balance out there. We need to push information to the clients. We are implementing XMPP actually as we speak. So the plan is to have a profile that works with XMPP probably by the end of this month even.
Okay, very good. And then the next question is from Alejandro, who asks, many industries as potential clients only want to be able to have flow of power readily available rather than invest. How to interest them?
So I think that's, of course, a very good question for the market itself, I suppose. Well, I think, I mean, the only quick answer I can give here is that I see that a lot. That there's utilities out there that understandably have not really had a lot of time and resources to look at all the smart grid technology. So they're waiting to see what happens. Now it becomes really difficult for them if each and every one of them needs to contract with a large vendor and design their own back end and design their own systems. So having a standardized technology like OpenADR, or even in that case, like for instance, Smart Energy Profile or others, should really help these utilities to come up to speed very quickly. And with that, also the rollout of programs, and that has this whole pigtail after it, where you trend big companies and down to eventually small companies and residential clients.
Okay, very good. And one more question in the chat window before we move to the Q&A. By the way, we will have to run about 10 to 15 minutes over because there are a lot of good questions, and we don't want to shorten the presentations because of these questions. So expect this thing to run another 15 minutes beyond our regular time. The next question is from Sirini, who asks, what, in your opinion, is the trigger for the wide adoption of OpenADR?
I think, as I mentioned before, overall demand response is of course, I believe, at least one of the killer applications for smart grid and for the utility, besides efficiency. Efficiency improvements, that's one thing where we in the US and globally we can make really quantum leaps, and I think we're doing that all. But on the other side, it is demand response that will really trigger all of this. Now, why automated demand response? Well, imagine, I think one of the big aggregators on the East Coast, they have already 11,000 clients. So their operations center, when they have an event, it's really rotating. I mean, there's phone calls, there's emails, and everything, just to follow up and get things rolling. So, to make this worthwhile, also for instance for utilities to provide incentive payments, they would like to see a guaranteed value of it, of course. So they want to see a guaranteed resource allocation for this. So the automation is one of the key aspects there, and it's really, we have seen the blackouts, we have seen the near blackouts. So I think this overall vicious cycle is simply the trigger for that.
Okay, we have a few more questions on your presentation before we move to the Usnap presentation. Art Altman asks, does OpenADR have competition as a standard? For example, are there commercial products using different communication protocols? Are there standards groups working on alternatives? What are the pros and cons of each alternative?
All right. So there's really not that much as far as other open standards are concerned. To really relay the information content that we have in OpenADR, there is not much else out there. Of course, there might be proprietary solutions, and there could be many of them, of course. I can't really comment on those. I don't know exactly which ones they would be. There's some effort in Europe that has been going on since a few years, and we will have to see what they come up with. But essentially, we are working with the IEC also to input our standards into the IEC, as well as other efforts throughout the world. So we're also talking to a lot of Japanese companies, as well as the ministry there and the utilities, and we're looking at China as well. So I don't have really any examples for an open standard that would do all of what OpenADR does. So I think that's the short answer here.
Okay, very good. And there is a question from Joe Hughes who asks about the OpenADR standard. It says, what has been done to codify or otherwise integrate the work in SDOs that have done work in closely related areas?
That's of course not easy to answer. There could be many. I'm not sure which ones he means. Again, just to reiterate here, we are using the work that Oasis has done based on requirements from all these different SDOs out there. Again, of course, there could be many, so I'm not exactly sure which ones are in question.
Well, one that comes to mind, Rolf, is the RP 1011 report that ASHRAE put out. This was about maybe 10, 12 years ago, where they were also trying to put together a demand response framework, for different types of services that could be supported in a protocol. Okay. If you've come across that.
Yeah, I can't really comment on that particular report, but I do know that several of these entities that I showed in one of the slides have taken a lot of different inputs into consideration, and one of them was also from ASHRAE. I believe there was a report from them about, by now, like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and in fact this report also refers to OpenADR as well as the Smart Energy Profile as some of the key technologies there. So there might be some newer reports from them.
Okay, very good. We'll move along. The next question is this something we can implement in meter level or application level? I don't see that question as a mutually exclusive thing, but go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Same here. I mean, the communication to the meter is generally done, or at least from what I've seen, it is done slightly differently. And usually you have some proprietary communication, mostly wireless, sometimes also over power line, but primarily wireless with some neighborhood area networks and things like that, which then relays usage information and readings back. So we're not really looking at that area per se. If a meter is connected through, I should say, the internet, well, of course it could also relay that information. But again, I think at this point it's being done on a more proprietary system. On the other side of the meter, there again it depends on architecture. It could be a smart energy profile that connects to, for instance, a home energy management system or to an OpenADR-enabled device. So I think the options are almost endless to set this up. Yeah, I don't see any pros and cons here for both sides.
I think one of the attractive aspects of this, Rolf, is the fact that it will be an open standard. And so the exact location of it is not as big an issue as what applications it's going to support.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, next question is from your good old friend, Benno. He asked, what about adoption outside the U.S.?
Yeah, good question, Benno. As I briefly mentioned already. So one of the prime targets for the OpenADR technology right now is Japan. Of course, everybody knows about the bad problems they had last year after the earthquake, and that has, I believe, triggered to really try and move very, very quickly into an automated system that can hopefully prevent anything, I mean, even magnitudes smaller than that to affect them much. So so Japan is really looking at implementing that. I don't think they have anything quite yet. And then again, we're working with the IAC to get this in. However, if you remember, there was one slide where I showed the sort of global usage, and there are already several pilot projects going on. You can go to the Lawrence Berkeley National Labs website, LBNL, and the DRRC over there, which is the Demand Response Research Center. So if you Google LBNL and DRRC, you'll get there, and there's actually an interactive map that shows you the deployments around the world. Very good.
Kartik asks, is there or are there any pilots or working models?
Yes. So as I just mentioned, maybe that question came in earlier. So there's a bunch of trials out there, and in California, as I said, we have I think unofficially 260. I believe we always kind of it down to 250 megawatts already deployed in these programs. One instance that everybody can sort of keep in mind, even me, although my memory is really bad these days, is California Pizza Kitchen. That chain here in California has actually auto response and OpenADR built into all of their restaurants here in California, for instance.
All right, and we have just two more questions, and I would request that we hold off further questions, and we can communicate directly with Rolf on any further questions. So we'll limit it to these two that are on it. One is Matt Lamp asks, is there a target date for having the test tools available to test the program developed for a demand response server now under construction?
Yes, in fact there is. So we're developing different profiles, and if you want to know more about that, feel free to email me. And for the first profile that we're developing, which is done by now, the test tool will be available, in fact, by the end of this month. So the Alliance is sponsoring the development of this test tool. We wanted to make sure that we have one unified solution, and yeah, it's going to be available by the end of this month, probably in a beta version, and then after maybe the last kinks are ironed out, it will be available as a final version.
Okay, and Joe Fresca asks, Erfan, can you ask to restate the online deployment maps that he just spoke about? So you had just...
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not sure if I can make a text entry here somewhere. I guess probably not really, but if you Google LBNL, so Lawrence Berkeley National Labs, LBNL, and DRRC for Demand Response Research Center. You should find a web link to the drrc.lbl.gov, and on this website, on the left-hand side, I believe I have to open it up. I can't do that off the top of my mind right now, but there are some pilot studies and implementations. I believe it's an open audit demand response, and I believe there's this interactive map in there for you to check out.
Very good. Yes, and we can put that URL in the PDF version that we will circulate.
Yeah, good idea.
Next, final question from Roger Levy. Actually, it's not a question. He's stating some of the pilots. He says some of the OpenADR pilots include the Sacramento municipal departments, residential moving into second year, and then NV Energy, it's the stimulus project for customer behavior. There's a pilot for that. Hawaiian Electric with the fast demand response pilot, and NYSERDA with the ConEd pilot. So he's listed some for our.
Yep, exactly.
Very good. So without any further delay, I have made you a presenter again for the Usnap one. Please take 15 minutes or so and quickly do this Q&A, and then we'll switch back to Ben.
I will speed this up. The Usnap, of course, is somewhat related, yet it forms a completely different section of this overall architecture here. So let's quickly look at that. At the home area network for a second here. Of course, it applies also for wide area networks and neighborhood area networks. But looking at the home area network, we see a whole bunch of different technologies in there. And there's always this question about who is the winner for smart grid and who's the loser. And at the end of the day, for me as more technology person, I think that many, if not all of them, have their merits and will certainly further be used because they might have good applications for certain areas in which they are deployed in. So that all being said, it's even more complex if you look at the different devices in the houses or the different areas, if you will. Whether you look at smart meters or other HAN devices, but then on the other end of the spectrum you have the pool pumps, irrigation systems, and so on. And again, these might all have their own specific way to communicate. Some would like this energy profile, some would like a climate talk, and so on and so forth. So there's a great variety of these items in here. That being said, now looking a little bit further forward at the general architecture, again, there's also different ways of reaching the home. As we said, we could do this wirelessly, over a broadband, over the power line, all kinds of different means to get to the home. And I think these technologies do not really exclude each other, but the key is to integrate these technologies and make them work together in a sustainable fashion. So that's where we're really our idea came in. And if you look at the computer industry, you had that for a few years, right? You had the PCMCIA adapter where you can have either even memory on it, or you can have a local area network card, you can have a wide area network card, or any other interface that you have, and you can just plug it in your computer. Of course, these days, some of these technologies are superseded by something like USB or other interfaces there. So it makes total sense for us to say for a smart grid device, and you see it here on the right-hand side, this is in fact an actual device that we have out there. It would make total sense to have a plug-in module that can be used to connect a smart device with any kind of communication protocol. So whether this is in a home area network protocol or a wide area network protocol, or even connecting it straight to like a neighborhood area network or some other communication. So that is really the thought here for Usnap. And again, this is a working thermostat that's out there and being sold as we speak. So that the goal is really that all of us can play nicely together. I think all the technologies have great merits, so we want to make sure they work together and get their strength really put into the market. Now, looking at the other side, what is really a requirement from smart grid, from smart energy? If we think about the consumer for a second, the key is to really get them integrated in the overall process. So it'd be great to have something that's installable by a consumer, or that it works together everywhere. If you move your household from one county to another, or even from one state to another, and you bring your expensive smart refrigerator, you don't want to have this stranded there, not being able to connect. So that is really one of the key aspects here. So focusing on Usnap a little bit, also one of these California peer program efforts. It started not quite as early as OpenADR, but it became reality very quickly when the Radio Thermostat Company of America designed their first Usnap module, and is selling this actually through Home Depot. This is that you saw earlier on the slides, front and back. And then the Usnap Alliance was formed for the same reasons as the OpenADR Alliance, to make this a product standard, so that product companies can take it, can run with it, can build a product. And we're now in the process of designing also a certification and testing program around that. However, here in between, and you see that here in the 2010-2008 time frame, something very interesting happened. Also one of these NIST efforts, one of the hubs over there, created a working group which was actively looking at modular communication interfaces. And of course, Usnap said, yes, we have something. But EPRI also stepped up and said, yes, we also have something that we have been building for a while. So that was a great opportunity for us to get together with these folks. And within the period of about 6 months, I think we were able to merge the two specifications together. And the combined focus was really just to make sure it works. It is able to bring basically to any kind of device out there, and to also, and that is one of the key aspects here, excuse me, to bring pass-through capacity to more sophisticated devices if they want to use it. So this combined EPRI and Usnap spec worked out pretty well for us so far, but we didn't stop there. Let's take a quick look, though, at the physical interface here for a second. Essentially, we're talking about a little module. You saw that in the previous pictures, and we have different form factors for that. But we're talking about a little module that can be plugged into a smart grid device. And we're, of course, for instance, talking to appliance manufacturers and manufacturers of water heaters, down to the load controller, as well as the thermostats, as you saw, of course, before. But also, a little bit removed from that, we have some energy management system manufacturers that integrate several Usnap ports, just to be able to communicate to anything that will be thrown at them eventually. So this little unit here again has two different architectural ideas. One is the pass-through, where you can have the protocol spec implemented in the smart grid device, and you pass through things like Smart Energy Profile or even OpenADR with web services and things like that. Or it can have a direct control. It would have your intelligence in the little module here, and with that, you would then use just a simple set of commands to communicate with the smart grid device. Now let's flip this here to save some time. Essentially, as I mentioned briefly, we have two form factors here. One is this what we call DC form factor. That's the one you saw in the picture earlier. It's a nice little flat interface that's behind a thermostat or behind all kinds of small devices. It's about 2 inch by 2 inch and about ½ an inch high. So it's a really small system. And then we have what we call AC form factor, and this is also something that came from the EPRI project. And that one, of course, can also support PLC communications, because we see that a lot of these simpler devices, say like a water heater, for instance, they might not have a lot of intelligence in there. It might be easy to connect them through a power line, and they could take line voltage directly into the module. So that module has a similar size, but you can picture it as a little bit more of a cube, or almost like a little relay, as I always say, you find in your car. So these are the components here. Then again, let's also jump over the details here for the sake of time. We have now started with Usnap, EPRI, and the NIST Home to Grid working group that originally initiated this merger project. We have started this standard development process. So we have talked to several of these big SDOs out there, and several of them, including CEA, were really happy to take this project on. And at the end of the day, we decided to go with the Consumer Electronics Association. So they formed a new committee for us, R7.8, and the work group in this committee is working hard on modifying the standard that fits the CEA guidelines and the ANSI guidelines for the national standard. And we hope that by the end of June, if no particular obstacles are being thrown in our way, we'll have the so-called then ANSI CEA 2045 modular communications interface specification. And again, it is really based on the Usnap spec before. We're hoping for just a few updates in there. And then Usnap will use this international standard for their testing and certification efforts on that. So real quick on the Usnap Alliance, also a non-profit organization. Here you see a bunch of the members, a lot of the same suspects I think you saw on the other chart, and they're typical for all the smart grid efforts. And then last but not least, the conclusions here that we want to enable the smart grid ready products. And I think I'll leave it at that since time's flying here, and I give it back to Erfan for now.
Thank you, Rolf. And for the sake of time, what we'll do is we'll have Ben come and present right away so that in the regular time, the attendees can see all the presentations. But then after Ben's talk, we're going to have an integrated Q&A so that you can ask questions of both people. And we will continue that until 45 after the hour. So this way, everybody gets a chance to see all the presentations. So thank you very much, Rolf. And at this point, I'm going to move the presenter thing to myself and then have Ben's presentation come up. And then I will move the presenter ball back to Ben. So Ben, are you on the line?
I'm still here, yeah, sure am. As they say in the basketball lingo, give me the rock.
Here we go. So just a quick intro. I've already spoken at length about Ben at the beginning of this presentation, but Ben is a seasoned professional in this area. He has spent many years in public service, and we're really honored to have him here. And he will tell us, educate us on what's going on the policy and regulatory side of both cybersecurity and data privacy. So with that, Ben?
Thank you very much, Erfan and Erfan, and thank you for having me on this program. Rolf did a great job. I have some bad news for some of you engineering folks out there that like to see a lot of graphics. I think I only have one in all these slides. So, you know, we regulatory people are more verbal, and sometimes I realize a picture's worth 1,000 words, but when you get paid by the word, what good does that do you? So let's get started here. I want to say good afternoon to everyone on the line here. I see we have about 102 people now. What we want to talk about are several things. You know, first of all, I want to say there are many e-forums and there's many conferences these days on the smart grid. You have to pay good money to travel to see them or to listen to them, and frankly, many times the value just doesn't seem to be there. Well, fortunately, this one is for free. So if anyone thinks this is a waste of their time, then at least it wasn't a waste of your money also. Today, I want to present some discussion points. I also want to pose a couple of questions for thought. The first question to be mulling around is, do we have the technology today to meet what is needed for smart grid cybersecurity tomorrow? Or do we find solutions after we find the problem? And then number two would be, what role do sensors play in linking physical security to cybersecurity, and do the policies of today reach far enough into the future to capture this nexus? There's a significant effort going on, which a lot of you are very much aware of, spearheading these issues, and it's being put on by NIST and the SGIP, and they're looking real hard at these issues. They also are recruiting. So for anyone that has a little more time on their hands, this would be a great place to spend it. Just a little bit about who EnerNex is. If some of you aren't aware, I'm not gonna read all this to you. I just want to show you, and also to satisfy my boss, that yep, we are working here. And you can see who this is. You can find us on our website. Most of you already know who we are and what we do, but you know, there might be a few of you that don't. So for those few, here it is, and I'm not going to talk about it. What I do want to talk about, though, is our first topic, and that's the regulatory compact. So let's kind of get on the same page here. And the regulatory compact, for what it's called, has been around since Moses was a lad. And if you worked in regulatory affairs, you'll have heard of it on occasion, maybe a lot. But what has it got to do with this discussion? Everything to some and nothing to others, but I'll let you decide. And in this discussion, it is something good advocates should understand. And Bob Jenks, who I'll explain later who he is, recognizes this reason. And I took this information from him, and he says, if you're going to change something, you need to understand what you're changing. And I think we can all agree with that. Bob is the executive director of the Citizens Utility Board of Oregon, and he wrote a good article recently about what he thinks the regulatory compact has to do with smart grid. And here are some of his thoughts. But first I want to thank Bob for taking the time to write the article. And if you want to read it, the site below on this slide will get you there. As it says, regulators have responsibility to protect customers or consumers from monopoly abuse. Rates must be just and reasonable. Who decides? The burden of proof is on the IOU. The regulator decides. Assets are used and useful. Well, that means just buying an asset is not justification to pass the cost through to consumers. It has to be put in service to the customer. It has to be a prudent purchase. Cybersecurity did not exist when the compact was invented years ago. It's a new item, but it can fit in the same asset model. That is why it's important to know what it takes to protect the asset. Privacy's been with us for some time, and utilities have had programs for years that won't allow anyone to have the names of their customers for marketing purposes or any other purpose unless the customer agrees first. So there's really nothing new here. There's one departure here, and that is that Bob says that the asset is owned by the customer. Some of you might agree with that, but I think if the customer does not own the customer will own anything the utility provides if the customer says he does. And just to prove the point, if you take that meter off your house, throw it away, and you will have to pay to have another one put back on your house, plus the cost less depreciation of the meter you tossed if you want to get your lights turned back on. So let's talk about utility jurisdictions for just a moment. When we talk about jurisdictions, this is a good topic to discuss for days, actually, but we don't have time for that. I'm going to try to do it in 2 minutes. State and federal utility regulators are very important, and their work should never be taken lightly. Generally, you hear FERC regulate, it's the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, regulates transmission in interstate markets, and states regulate the stuff that's not interstate, but it's completely inside the state. To some extent, that's true, and may be oversimplifying, but as with everything, not always. If you click on the site, you will see FERC also has something to do with wholesale markets, market-based rates, demand response, electric reliability, transmission investment, siting, natural gas storage, and on and on and on. One of the things I wanted to point out about this federal jurisdiction is that Order 1000 is a new FERC order, and it's important to us because it requires a public utility transmission provider to improve transmission planning processes and allocate costs for new transmission facilities to the beneficiaries of those facilities. I'm going to skip down a little bit, but what this does is order number 1000 builds on order number 888, which was effected back in 1996, and the planning reforms of order 890, which was done more recently, 5 years ago, back in 2007. What I recommend, though, is you read the link that's provided at the bottom of the slide and then click on what each FERC commissioner had to say about Order 1000. So why do we have Order 1000? Well, the bottom line to me is that costs must be allocated at least roughly commensurate with estimated benefits, and those that receive no benefits should not be allocated costs. And no costs should be allocated outside a region unless the other region agrees. Let's talk a little bit about state jurisdictions. This is a typical state utility regulatory agency. It's what it does. Missouri is what I would call typical, even though it's an extra special state. It is not typical at all. However, if a state is not restructured or unbundled or competitive rate priced, then it generally follows a traditional pattern of regulation. And as you can see, some of the tenets up there are saying that the Commission will ensure Missourians receive safe and reliable utility service at just, reasonable, and affordable rates. They'll support economic development either through traditional rate of return regulation or competition as required by law. And they'll provide an efficient regulatory process. The link there will show you exactly what I'm talking about. There's an exception, though, as far as what I would call an exceptional state, I guess is what I should say, as far as what I would call differing from the traditional regulatory model, and that's the state of Texas, where in June 1999, when Senate Bill 7 was passed, they went to a market price or market-based rate. Several states are using some form of restructuring, but I'd call Texas probably the poster state. Because in one day, everybody that was in the ERCOT footprint, which was their retail transmission provider, had to find a retail electric provider. Of course, this idea wasn't born overnight. It took some time. Some other folks, when it first came out, thought it was a really bad idea, and some of it thought it was the best thing since Frito-Lay discovered taco chips. I think right now that's the feeling generally of what most people are doing since the rates have gone down significantly. One of the things that's a huge change that I'd bring to your attention is when you look at the bill in Texas, what you're going to see is a base charge, current charge, demand charge, energy charge, meter charge, recurring charge, non-recurring charge, amount due, new services or products, changes in rates, late payment penalty, city sales tax, advanced metering charge, and there's about 7 or 8 others that finally end with a nuclear decommissioning fee. Now that's kind of, folks, what I call unbundling. Okay, now I think we're ready to go on to cybersecurity and privacy. Here is my graphic. You may have seen it before, but what it does is it kind of sets up pictorially where some of the issues take place with cybersecurity as well as privacy. Both state and federal regulators are concerned with cybersecurity and privacy. And they are different animals, but they are alike also in some ways. To the security experts I work with at EnerNex, if we're talking about mammals, both would fit in what both would fit if we're talking about mammals, but it would be like comparing whales to dogs. I would direct you to the NIST SGIP Cybersecurity Working Group, and Rolf mentioned the website. You can Google it, and it generally will take you to a way to get there. There is a site at the bottom of this slide, too, that you can use. That's the best information available on the subject as far as I'm concerned. It's free. The website is easy to find. Two of their leaders, Marianne Swanson and Jeff Mazur of NIST, are going to be speakers next month for this webinar series. They can give you all the details of what's going on at the CSWG. Just check out the website. But there are many ideas about cybersecurity and almost as many definitions. Today we are talking about smart grid and related stakeholders. I just want to say that the energy sector has become increasingly dependent on information technology, and that's the hardware, software, and firmware, as we know. The processes, the industrial control systems, people working together to provide organizations with the capability to process, store, transmit information in a timely manner to support the various missions and business functions. That's a lot of work. Cybersecurity needs to fit into the mission, vision, and values of a utility. It should not be used like an add-on or a bolt-on to the utility environment. And that means interoperability and availability may become a huge issue in the future. It already is a huge issue to some of us today. Cybersecurity is different than physical security, but the question is, can one complement the other? Perhaps through the right technology, this is possible. If possible, the cybersecurity policies need to complement the schematic, because gone are the days when obfuscation was considered all the security a utility needed. Next slide. So what are we talking about? Whales or dogs? Well, we're talking about the definition in a broad sense, and you'll see this on the cybersecurity working group website, that it's for the power. The cybersecurity for the power industry covers harmful intrusions, other invasive threat issues involving automation and IT communications, and you can read the rest for yourself. One of the things that one of the questions that we need are, is there a distinct interplay between cybersecurity policy and cybersecurity technology? We need to find the answer to that if we don't already know. Can technology keep up with the changes in cybersecurity? That's a question that's yet to be answered. Can we design the tools to detect a cybersecurity attack? I think we can. Can the tool thwart the attack and render it harmless? Well, we don't know all things. We hope that it will. Is that tool flexible to be reused for detection and mitigation again and again? Or are we looking at designing new tools to thwart new attacks? Another question that needs answering. Frankly, a loud message needs to be sent to the policymakers at all levels. Sophisticated and very intelligent people are working on the interdependency of cybersecurity policy and technology. And frankly, if it was easy, it would already be done. Here's an example. I borrowed this slide from my good friend Roger Levy, and I hope he doesn't take offense to me using it, because it's really good work that the Lawrence Berkeley Lab folks are doing. But you can see this is real. Attacks are real, and they're also secret. So the actual threat is not public information generally. This one happens to be. It's a recent example of a successful attack on the Davis-Besse nuclear power plant. And what I would say is, if it happens once, then perhaps it could happen again at other nuclear plants. Another slide I borrowed from Roger is, foreign governments have been suspected as potential cyber terrorists. I don't think it's a question of suspecting, it's just a matter of proof. But this slide is part of the LBNL tutorial on cybersecurity, and if you get a chance to see the whole thing, don't miss it, because it's really very good. Thank you, Roger. The other one is just an example that may not be new threats, but with increased emphasis on communications technology that impacts our electricity supply and delivery system, we have to prepare for challenges in the future. Here are some additional recent real-world examples that show the need for a utility to ensure that a risk management and cybersecurity program is implemented within their operational and corporate environment. This particular attack in San Diego, one of the news reports was saying that people were stuck over in Mexico for an extra night, which is, for a guy like me, that probably wouldn't be too bad, but with somebody that had something that they really were desperately to get to back for that evening, like, you know, paying the babysitter or whatever to who was watching the kids or something like that, then it can be really traumatic with no way to get in touch with anyone and for things like that. So let's talk about data privacy a little bit. Something we all want to think we have and are shocked when we find out we don't have it. Have you ever had your identity stolen? My wife did. That wasn't a pleasant experience at all. So it happens more often than you would think. What I want to show you is this is some recent concern from the Office of the President. This is a report that was released by the Office of the President which touched on data privacy, and the points cover the message sent to policymakers. There's just a couple of them here that evaluate the best ways to ensure that consumers receive meaningful information and education about smart grid technologies and create track record of transparency and responsiveness. Address consumer concerns about data privacy. That's pretty important. Came right from the President's office. So, what is data privacy? Well, if you're from California, you can see that California Senate Bill 1476 has a very thorough idea of what a privacy policy should look like. AMI metering data privacy has been a concern in California since 2007, and this bill 1476 covers 4 main concerns, as pointed out in the slide. The focus is on prohibitions aimed at the utility. And it says, Mr. Utility, you shall not do this. Mr. Utility, you shall do this. Mr. Utility, you should release this. Utilities are, but then the continued use, the bottom says utilities are explicitly granted permission to continue using customer energy data for analysis, reporting, and program management. Now, I don't know what you folks think about that when you see it, but I don't know what would the utility do if they weren't granted that right. Here's what the CPUC decision just recently, July 28th, said, and they adopted a rule to protect privacy and security of electric customers for the 3 main IOUs in California. As you can see, it's very prescriptive. The site down at the bottom will take you to more details, but what I wanted to point out was that they were supposed to file within 90 days changes to their policies to conform to this particular rule. They were to submit annual reports on privacy. They were to file independent audits of their respective privacy and security practices. Make the price, usage, and cost information available to customers online. Work with the Cal ISO to make wholesale prices available. Provide third-party data access if the customer consents. A couple of additional requirements. Begin pilot programs to make real-time data available. I don't really know what that has to do with privacy, but evidently it found its way into this rule. Develop and file a home area network plan. Now that definitely has something to do with privacy. Other states that are involved, Colorado's got a rule that's actually on hold waiting for a rehearing or a grant of rehearing if the commission so orders. I haven't heard whether that's gone through or not. But the one thing I would point out while you look at this is that this proposed rule allows for a $2,000 penalty to be assessed for every unintentional violation that's directed at the utility. So, if you were to build a privacy policy roadmap, there are several things you should think about. I've listed a few of them here. This is certainly not all of them, but this will get you started. And I'm not going to read them to you for the sake of time. But Let's talk about some federal cybersecurity efforts. DOE launches an initiative. This came out not too long ago, January 5th, and talks about the policy efforts to enhance the security and reliability of the nation's electrical grid. The Electric Sector Cybersecurity Risk Management Maturity Project. All right, this is a partnership with DOE and the Department of Homeland Security to leverage the insight of private industry and public sector experts to build on existing cybersecurity measures and strategies to create a more comprehensive and consistent approach to protecting the nation's energy delivery system. One of the main thrusts of this particular document here is that over the next several months, the department is going to host a series of workshops. To my knowledge, I don't think any of them have happened yet. If they did, I missed it, and I'll apologize for that, for not being able to tell you. But it's a combination of about a dozen utilities and grid operators and others that are going to talk about how to build one of these maturity models. And then they're going to try to actually have a public-private partnership to pilot this model to see how it works this summer. So if you go to this website, it may be instructive as to how you might want to participate if it's not closed off. Let's talk a little bit about some potential laws. This is the part about what might happen. Although I want to give you a caveat. It's unlikely that, and I'm hearing this from the people that are on Capitol Hill and frequent Capitol Hill, that it's unlikely that there's going to be anything passed until after the election. But of course, as soon as I say that, then maybe but the next time they meet, they might do something like this. But Congress is involved. H.R. 3674, Promoting and Enhancing the Cybersecurity and Information Sharing Effectiveness Act. It's one of several bills that are attacking the cybersecurity issue. The interesting thing about this is that it provides the Secretary of Homeland Security a leading role in cybersecurity. The Department of Homeland Security is given responsibility for maintaining clearinghouse of cyber threat information and disseminating that information broadly within the federal government and to the private sector. That's a fairly significant departure. Another law, H.R. 3523, Cyber Intelligence Sharing and Protection. This is a bill that gives the Director of National Intelligence a leading role in cybersecurity information sharing. He used to be able to share it with all the intelligence communities and cybersecurity entities and for their use. I already thought he had that role, but I guess that's not true. Sorry, let me catch up here. There are several other federal bills on data privacy. I'm not going to go into these. You can see these when you get a copy and look at them at your own leisure. I just wanted to bring it to your attention that there are some other opportunities to become involved in smart grid standards with the SGIP, and I wanted to say this again. They are looking for recruits. Some state action. The state of Maine passed a resolution. It lays out what the PUC is supposed to do about cybersecurity. You can read this. I'm going to hurry on through here because it's we're almost at that point. The Maine PUC did follow up on the legislature's suggestions, which is probably a wise thing to do. But the PUC hasn't finished what they're doing yet because they say they'll continue to evaluate additional privacy protections or security measures that may be necessary to protect the privacy of customer information. That was that slide. As with the privacy roadmap, here is another. This is not a complete list, but it's a good start for things to think about if you're going to start your own cybersecurity strategy. I want to finish up by saying that in January of this year, there was an audit that was conducted by the DOE Inspector General. A couple of things came out of it. You can read for yourself, but it seems that cybersecurity wasn't given as much attention as it needed to be by the FERC or by NIST. I can't imagine how they came to that conclusion, but it was the GOA audit, I'm sorry, that indicated that NIST provided some guidelines or didn't provide some guidelines for physical attack. I can tell you, being involved with the NIST SGIP, that the smart grid, the cybersecurity working group works endlessly and tirelessly on cybersecurity. So this is a mystery to me. The last thing I want to say is, from a practical perspective, what needs to happen? From a policy perspective, what can happen? And then, again, can sensor technology be linked between physical and cybersecurity? And with that, I'm finished. Erfan, if I've got this last one on here, if you need some more information, you can contact us there. There's our website.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ben. And we have some questions for our Usnap presentation while people post some questions for the cybersecurity and data privacy presentation. As I mentioned before, we will go 10 to 15 minutes beyond our regular time for this Q&A so that people who are on the webinar have a good opportunity to ask these questions. And as Ben mentioned, next month's presentation is on March 12th. It's always on the second Monday of every month at 1 p.m. Pacific. And Marianne Swanson and Jeffrey Mazer of NIST are going to provide an update on all the work that's going on in NIST and Smart Grid and focused on cybersecurity and standards for interoperability. So I am looking forward to a good attendance from all of you as well as the larger industry on that presentation. So I'm giving you a month's notice so you can put it on your schedule. That's March 12th, 1 p.m. Pacific. Let's look at some of the questions now from the audience on the Usnap. One of the questions was from Eduardo, and Rolf, I'd like you to come back on the audio. He asked, can you ask the presenter if he can share some links or examples of real estate developer applications of the Usnap where they can be exposed to an actual need from the energy suppliers, stakeholders, and so that they be more knowledgeable in this topic. And then he goes on to amplify. He says, I meant actual developers from energy suppliers, stakeholders, and consumers with more information and regarding developers will be able to help the supply chain from A to Z. So what he's looking at is, because Eduardo is based in Mexico, and there a lot of this work about automation is occurring with development companies rather than the utilities. So the question is, what can the Usnap folks do to help create an interface with this group?
Yeah, interesting question. Can you hear me, Erfan? Am I on? I think I am.
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Yeah, interesting question. I do not have links per se available. Of course, there's always a link to the Usnap website, usnap.org, but that might not specifically address what Eduardo is concerned about. So I would say I would be happy to have a dialogue with Eduardo on this, and maybe if you, Erfan, can maybe make the connection there. I'm not sure if I can see his email here.
Yeah, I'll be happy.
Then I'll be happy to explore that further. Mm-hmm.
Not a problem.
Okay,
I will be.
Let's do that then.
Connection. The next question, well, Michael Shea asked about the skip slide. So, Mike, we are going to be sharing all the presentations in PDF format later this week with everyone who's on the call plus the distribution list. So look for that. And Joe Hughes asked, did the Usnap work build upon prior CEA work such as EIA 600 or EIA 721? I believe referring to the AHAM standard, I believe there was an EIA 600. It's going back away, CBUS, that's what it was. And then the EIA 721, is that the echelon work, I believe? The lawn works?
Yeah, I think we have Barry on the line who would probably know more about that even. Yeah, I have to check into it again. I mean, a lot of things were flowing into this. I don't think we specifically referenced any of these standards, but I don't think we have any history per se with either of these specifications. Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. Any questions for Ben? I see that we have completed all the questions.
Erfan, I see here 2 questions that seem to have arrived sort of like in my inbox here.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if that's possible, but it looks like it. Greenie van Buren asked if is DR communication to residential and small commercial buildings being implemented? So quick answer on that is yes, on the small commercial buildings, we see smaller energy management systems that are being equipped with OpenADR. And in fact, we do also see some thermostats popping out now and other really small, more residential focused gateways and energy management systems. I do not know if they are deployed yet. But one of our member companies, for instance, they have a residential energy manager that works, for instance, with X10 and Insteon on the other side, so can tie into existing home automation technologies to essentially create some home intelligence and some way to shape your energy consumption behavior there. And then the other question was from Nick Abi Samra. What are OpenADR latency requirements and limitations? Actually, very good question. Currently, in the current deployments, we are primarily working with a pull model. With other words, the energy managers out there, so the clients, they are pulling the events from the server, and right now they are pulling every minute. So that would mean that there is always a latency of 1 minute. However, in the current programs, generally these events are created about 24 hours before they actually occur, or at least several hours. So that's not a big deal. From a energy balancing, load balancing, or frequency stabilization perspective, the requirements are for 4 seconds. So we want to try and achieve that in the push scenario, where we can send the events or participation information directly to the systems. And 4 seconds is a very tight schedule, of course. So we'll have to make sure that in the implementations out there, there's no underlying firewall issues or other delays that could influence that. So again, from an OpenADR perspective, we're pretty open. It's more boiling down to internet connectivity at the end of the day, but we're aiming for 4 seconds right now. And I think those were all the questions I saw here in this specific box. Back to Erfan here.
Thank you, Rolf. And we have a question from Michael Shea for Ben, and the question is, would cybersecurity be managed like the freeway traffic being managed with highway patrol and publicly understood penalty imposed to the violators, etc.?
Wow, that's a great question. I hope not, but there's no way to know how it's going to be managed, because we don't know what's going to be implemented just yet. You're going to need to ask Mary Ann probably next month something similar to that. Until we have more on what the federal government's going to do, if anything, then there's just not really much to speculate on how they're going to enforce it. If you know, when they said the Homeland Security guys were going to maybe get a bigger hand in cybersecurity, immediately I came to mind my wonderful experiences at every airport I have to go through. And I know those folks do a whole lot more than just look in bags and try to find bottles of water. But I don't have an answer for that. I'm not sure anyone does at this point. But there are far better experts on that than I am. I just don't think that how do you assess a fine to a foreign government if they are doing something illegal in the first place? It's a good question, but I don't have the answer. Sorry.
Okay, Ben, I have a question. It seems like the direction in which we're going for policies on cybersecurity, and particularly with data privacy, that they're trying to avoid these large-scale usurpation of customer data or getting into power grid and taking lots of data from the systems. So would it not make sense to have a more distributed architecture from an information gathering and storing perspective so that we can avoid creating too much strategic value for the data in one location? Is this an architecture that would be favorable for the regulatory climate that you're seeing at the state and federal level?
Well,
computing, distributed processing, and also the data is stored throughout the network and only like summaries are uploaded and exception reporting is done rather than centralizing this whole data flow to some common point where it could be compromised.
Erfan, the issues seem to be trending more toward let's solve the data privacy issue, and then we're going to have to really think hard about cybersecurity because it's two different issues. As I said, one's kind of like an elephant, the other's kind of like a dog. The elephant is the a whale, but the whale is the cybersecurity because of the impact it can have on the country when somebody makes a nuclear plant malfunction. Just to go back to that Davis-Besse example, it's a lot different than somebody actually having their data given to a third party who then hands it off to a fourth party and then he hands it off to everybody. They're very different problems. And as I said, that's best answered by somebody that is a certified security expert. One of our staff, Sandy Basic, I don't know if she's still on the line or not, but she's one of the best in the business, and she's part of that cybersecurity working group, and they struggle with these. I don't know that they're struggling, but they work with these things all the time. The trend here is let's solve the data privacy issue. What to do? You've got the utilities that don't necessarily want to be in the brokerage business. I mean, they don't necessarily want to be held accountable if a third party takes the information and uses it illegally or for some other purpose or steals it. They want to protect their customer as they actually have always, at least the days when I worked for a utility, that was one of our main goals, protect the customer. But the cybersecurity is a much bigger issue. So the question becomes, okay, the Congress is looking at whose bucket do we put this in? Who's the right carrier? Is it going to be the Homeland Security folks? Is it going to be the intelligence agency folks? And I think that's up in the air.
Okay, so we have Sandy on the line. Sandy, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Am I good for you guys?
Yes.
Okay. I was switching from my headset to the phone, so I did not hear the question.
It was just Ben saying that Sandy is the best they've got in the business. So he was complimenting, and I thought maybe you may want to share a few thoughts on cybersecurity and data privacy, and just kind of give us a sneak preview of next month.
Well, thank you,
Sorry,
Ben. I'll pay
Sandy.
you later.
Sorry.
Well, with the cybersecurity and the various requirements, just on the cybersecurity piece, we are going back through and reviewing the requirements in the NIST IR. So we're going back and we're refining those requirements. From the privacy piece, we're definitely going to be expanding a lot of that. And the privacy subgroup within the CSWG is definitely doing a lot of work, have set up some awareness training from the privacy aspect and information about that usage data. So we are progressing and looking at it at a more detailed review or detailed level, and also from the standards review, we're getting involved with that SGIP process and also looking at all of those standards and how they are including cybersecurity in those requirements now.
All right, wonderful.
And Erfan, I think your question was more toward a type of architecture.
Yes, and as I understand, next month we'll get into more detail about the types of architectures for information gathering and transmission that are more in line with the direction of the policies. Because one of the things we want to make sure is that the technology is not driving the policy. Because if that happens and Moore's law is put in place, everyone would want highly centralized systems, and yet the first compromise would create a huge blowback. And that's not the direction we want to go in. So there's an interplay. Policy makes technology, technology makes policy, but we have to always keep the eye on the prize, and that is the consumer and their life, and that they're not disenfranchised in any way, because we've come up with a wonderful way of providing energy services to them. So,
yes, and from that architecture in the storage, information storage and usage, technology not driving policy, yes, is a definite good way. And before I lost my internet connection, I heard you also state with not trying to store it, centrally. And yes, that would be a good thing. And to have technology not drive those policies, right now it's really hard because you've got the cloud. So a lot of munis and co-ops, that cloud environment is a wonderful place to be. But again, you need the cybersecurity and privacy requirements.
Right.
Also with the data warehousing and the reporting that, third parties and utilities want, that data warehousing also causes an issue with how much information is there, how much is being stored that access the whole thing. So we do have to get those requirements in first, but having an architecture to have that information decentralized is a scary thought, because that means that it's now in so many other places, and it's going to be even harder to keep track of.
Wonderful. Well, we will end it at that. I really thank all the attendees for staying on past the regular time so that the Q&A could be handled. So I want to take this opportunity to once again thank Rolf Bienert of the OpenADR Alliance and Ben Boyd from the EnerNex Corporation for the cybersecurity presentation, and of course the cameo appearance of Sandy on cybersecurity. The next call, as I said, is March 12th at 1 p.m. Pacific, and it will be for 90 minutes. We are privileged to have Marianne Swanson and Jeffrey Mazer of NIST presenting, and Sandy will be assisting in the development of that material over the next month. And also, the presentations are going to be coming in PDF format to all the attendees today, as well as the people on my distribution list. So look out for that. You will also be receiving a link for this recorded webcast so that you can watch it at a later time, or you can share it with friends and family as well as your colleagues. So with that, I'm going to now stop the recording